Today is an opportunity to improve your fantasy football team via the waiver wire. There's definitely some important names this week. Firstly, here are some key injuries that we're monitoring heading into week 10. Tucker Kraft, unfortunately, that looks like a season-ending injury. That's devastating, but if you need a tight end, I've got someone for you. CJ Stroud, with the concussion, he might miss next week. In Superflex leagues, that matters. We'll have to monitor Puka Nacua. Brian Thomas, that ankle injury looked rough. I would not expect him to be out there next week. De'Ami Brown also got concussed. Kayshon Boutte, Matthew Golden. These guys are dealing with some injuries. Now, the following names on your screen are guys that should already be rostered. So if you're in a smaller league, they should take priority. All right, before Monday Night Football kicks off, if you can sneakily add the following names, then I would do that because they're on bye, but they're actually potentially very valuable. For example, Dylan Sampson. Dylan Sampson could potentially be the starting running back for the Cleveland Browns this week. Now, Quinshon Judkins last week obviously went down with the shoulder injury. He was ruled day to day, but they do play the Jets this week, The last time that Judkins wasn't available for this team, you can see Dylan Sampson led the way with 17 PPR points, 11 in week 2 versus Baltimore, averaging over 5 targets per game. So definitely a name that needs to be rostered at this point because we don't know exactly how serious the Judkins injury is. How about Isaiah Davis? Well, if there is any potential trade with Breece Hall, sure, Isaiah Davis could have value, but also they're starting to utilize him more and more in this offense anyway. Last time out against the Bengals, he had 7 carries as well as 5 targets, so he's still a name that should be monitored if you can pick him up for free. How about Tez Johnson, who could be stepping into another opportunity where he's a lead wide receiver for the Bucs? He's averaging over 10 points per game since week 6. Obviously, we know the injury with Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's dealing with his own injury. Definitely a great name to monitor. Tank Bigsby, same thing. Saquon Barkley, we don't know how serious that injury is just yet. I know they're playing Green Bay, but if he's the starting running back for the Eagles, there's definitely some value there. And then Jerome Ford is a name that could potentially be moved in the trade market. So I do think he's like a speculative stash at this point. All right, let's go to our Honey Traps segment. These are guys that look very attractive, but they could actually put you in a sticky situation. You shouldn't be spending big time fab. If anything, if they're a free stash, great. Nothing more than that. Starting off with Keaton Mitchell. Keaton Mitchell last week had 18% of the snaps. That's actually his high on the season, 4 carries. But the reality is between Justice Hill, Derrick Henry, there's just, even if Henry went down, Justice Hill would still be involved. I just don't think it's worth it. Devin Neal. Now, this entire offense is terrible in New Orleans. Tyler Shuck looks awful. They've committed to him for the rest of the year. You can't start Kamara. You can't start Neal. I'm not sure it would matter if one of them were injured. Olamide Zaccheaus, who had his best game as a Bear here in week 9, 17.8 fantasy points. However, we all know that Luther Burden is the rookie here that had the concussion last week. He should be back soon, so there's no real reason to hold him. Demario Douglas, ultimately, every single week, there's a different name in this offense that's doing well. Maybe he is worth looking at if there's a long-term injury to Boutte, but outside of that, and I'm not doing it. And same thing with Kyle Williams. No, maybe he'll get more involved, but he's more of a stash than anything. All right, these first 3 players, I would say, are like the premier players to pick up this week. I do think there are some potential big pickups. Starting off with Alec Pierce. I don't care which of these names you go for. They're all at the top for me in the same tier. Let's start off with Alec Pierce. All right, so Alec Pierce is, having a really good season. It's definitely under the radar, but since week 2, this guy is averaging over 10 points per game. He's constantly being targeted downfield. You can see here, Lawrence Owen on Twitter mentioned that it's the second straight year where Alec Pierce is leading the NFL in yards per catch. They're constantly targeting him down the field. You'll see he has got games of 36 yards per catch and 17 and 24 and 19 and 34 and 19. He's constantly being targeted down the field. This is basically Jameson Williams, but it's made a lot more sense this year. There's been a lot more chemistry with him and his quarterback. And obviously, in the last couple weeks, he started to really heat up. He had 13 targets this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers, including 6 receptions for 115 yards. I do think we need to start taking him a little bit more seriously, and that's what I'm trying to do here in this game. Next, let's talk about Parker Washington. I would argue that Parker Washington actually has a safer floor than an Alec Pierce, but definitely a name that should be picked up in every single league. Okay, so here's why. If you guys remember, Travis Hunter went down with an potential ACL injury. Now, it's not torn or anything, but it's definitely a problem. Then we had De'Ami Brown, who suffered a concussion. Then Brian Thomas on this play, unfortunately sprained his ankle one of his best plays of the day. So you have no Travis Hunter, no De'Ami Brown, no Brian Thomas potentially. And what did Parker Washington do on Sunday? Oh, nothing too much, just 9 targets, 8 catches for 90 yards. I think we would all absolutely dream about 17 points in our flex spot. So he kind of catapults himself to the number 1 wide receiver for this team. There's also no Britton Strange for a little bit. Obviously, he went on IR. So Parker Washington could lead this team in targets for quite some time. Definitely worth considering. 15 to 30% of your fab, depending on how desperate you are. All right, if you need a tight end, Colson Loveland is the name to pick up. Rookies always get more and more involved as the year progresses. You can see it was pretty cool after the bye week to see his target share and his volume go up. 3, 4, 5, and then 7 targets in the last 4 weeks. Obviously, career day, 29 fantasy points, 6 catches, 118 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's been fantastic in these last couple of weeks. And I think this is a situation where once the genie's out of the bottle, how do you put him back in there? This is a round 1 wide receiver, very elite prospect out of Michigan. And now I feel like you're going to kind of force Ben Johnson's hand to really feature him a little bit more in this offense. All right, that's it for my tier 1, but let's go to tier 2. There are 2 names that I think are important as well. Starting off with Devin Singletary. Now look, the reality is with the New York Giants this year, there's not going to be a single guy now that Cam Scatterboot is out for the count. You can see here in week number 9, the Giants really split this backfield kind of down the middle. Devin Singletary led the way in snaps. He led the way in touches, but it was pretty much a 50-50 backfield. 7 points for Devin Singletary, just under 7 for Tyrone Tracy. And if you look at the rotation, you can see Devin Singletary got the goal line work, the short yardage work, early downs. He was out there primarily for this team. So it looks like a true split backfield. And, you know, at this point, Devin Singletary has just as much value as Tyrone Tracy. I mean, that's just the truth at this point. Next name that we can talk about here is Christian Watson. Now, Watson should be a little bit more, considered this week. Why? Well, because unfortunately, Tucker Kraft did go out of this game, and we don't expect him back this year. Sources say that he tore his ACL. So Christian Watson should be a feature of this entire offense. If you think about the Packers offense, they are really struggling with pass catchers. So you can see in this game, Malik Heath played a bunch. Matthew Golden went down with an injury. Tucker Kraft went down with an injury. You're already missing Jaden Reed. So many names. Dontavion Wicks, Romeo Doubs, and Christian Watson are now the clear targets in this offense. It's not that crowded right now. It's 1 and it's 2. And Watson is that second option for the Green Bay Packers. So definitely a name that I think you can pick up and flex on a weekly basis at this point, given all the injuries that have happened to that team. Just before we move on, I want to let you guys know that there's a free feature on the Flock site called the My Teams feature. All you got to do to access it is sign up with a free account, use my promo code LAND, then you'll get access. One of those cool little secret weapons that not many people know about. Expert consensus opinion on your team and recent trades and rankings. So check that out in the pinned comment. Okay, do you need a quarterback off the waiver wire? Well, I want to start with Joe Flacco. You know, he's not a option for this week, obviously, because he's going to be on the bye. But after that, he's an option every single week. I mean, since he's gotten to the Cincinnati Bengals, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football. He is basically Joe Burrow, but Joe's last name is Flacco instead. This is basically Joe Burrow production for you guys. So if you want to hold on to him after the bye, you can start him every single week. And with that wide receiver core, I mean, he can win you the league. We can also talk about J.J. McCarthy, who in his third start, he had a rushing touchdown, 2 passing touchdowns, looked really good, and plays Baltimore next week. In super flex leagues, how about Davis Mills, who's probably going to start this week for the Texans against the Jaguars? The reality is that concussion for CJ was quite serious, so I don't expect him to be back out there on the field this week. All right, here are some of the other guys that, you can spend a free waiver wire pickup on, no fab, but Torrey Horton is a name to monitor. Reports are that Cooper Kupp should be back and ready to go this week, but he did have an impressive performance on Sunday night. 4 catches, 48 yards, and 2 touchdowns, over 20 fantasy points. Terrell Jennings, if we see more missed time for Ramondre Stevenson, clearly he's going to have a role. He got into the end zone for the Patriots on Sunday, and, the Patriots are using Trayvon Henderson a little bit more, but they are also not just giving him the keys to the kingdom right now. You can see Terrell Jennings, 17 snaps, 12 total touches. So, Henderson still led the way, but Terrell Jennings had a role, and I think he will continue to have a role as long as Stevenson is out. And then in deeper formats, Luke Musgrave. Now, if you don't know much about Luke Musgrave, first off, 3 catches, 34 yards on Sunday. But this was a player that was actually drafted ahead of Tucker Kraft. And when he was coming out of college, he was just known as this athletic freak, a guy that just could be absolutely dominant after the catch, super athlete in space. I mean, a little bit like Colson Loveland, just not to the same extent, but he could be a very needed target in this offense. So you could actually replace Kraft with Musgrave if you wanted to. Isaiah Likely, one more name there in case Mark Andrews goes out and gets traded. Look, if you're not doing great in your home fantasy football league, I understand some of my leagues look that way as well. The pick me up for me, if I'm in those leagues, is to submit a DFS lineup. In week 8, I won the Quick 6 Super Slam. You can see the lineup that we deployed. Week 10 contest just opened. It's very simple. All you have to do is choose 6 non-quarterbacks. And you're good to go. You can use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50 when you sign up. And then you're going to get my week 10 rankings completely free. Okay, to end the video, I want to talk about defensive streamers. We've got the Broncos who go to the Raiders. That's the 5th best matchup. The Panthers versus the Saints, which sounds crazy, but the Saints are terrible. The Bills at the Dolphins. I picked them up myself before they played this week. The Ravens at the Vikings, which is one of the better matchups before last week. The Browns at the Jets, and the Jets versus the Browns. That should be a low-scoring game. So if you're looking to dive deep in your bag this week for defensive streamers, those are some legit options. All right, guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.